long and illustrious history, this is Chapter 3 of the Life in the UK test. This chapter will be split into 6 sections. 1. Early Britain. 2. The Middle Ages. 3. The Tudors and Stuarts. 4. A global power. 5. The 20th century. And 6. Britain since 1945. Let's look at what each section will cover. The first section of Chapter 3 goes through the history of Britain from its beginnings that can be traced back to the Stone Age, covering all the different civilizations that lived in Britain in the old times, including the Romans, the Anglo-Saxons, the Vikings, and the Normans. Section 2 examines the history of Britain during medieval times, including a review of the Black Death disease, which affected a large part of the British population and which resulted in the appearance of new social classes. The Middle Ages, or medieval times, also brought important legal and political changes, such as the development of parliaments in England and Scotland. This period is also known for the development of the English language. The last part of this section focuses on the British Civil War that gave rise to the House of Tudor. Section 3 is an overview of the Tudor and the Stuart monarchs of Britain, starting with the reign of Henry VIII at the beginning of the 16th century, followed by the reigns of his daughter Elizabeth I, James I of England and Charles I, to the creation of the English Republic by Oliver Cromwell, the restoration of the monarchy, and up to the times of the Glorious Revolution in the late 17th century. Furthermore, this section provides information about the Elizabethan period in England, which is a remarkable period in British history and which includes achievements such as the defeat of the Spanish Armada, the beginning of the colonization of new land, and that is also known by the richness of the British poetry and drama, to include playwrights such as William Shakespeare. Section 4 explores the creation of the constitutional monarchy, the creation of the Kingdom of Great Britain through the Act of the Union by which Scotland adhered to England and Wales, the rebellion of the clans in Scotland, the period of the Enlightenment during the 18th century, the Industrial Revolution driven by the development of machinery and the use of steam power, the booming of the slave trade and its subsequent abolition through the Emancipation Act, the Union of Northern Ireland, with England, Wales, and Scotland to form the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, the independence of a number of American colonies, the wars with France and the Crimean War, the growth of the British Empire, and the development of the democracy. Section 5 covers the periods from the First World War to the Second World War and what they meant for Britain. Section 6 runs through the political, social, and economic changes that took place in Britain after the Second World War and up to recent times. It also introduces some of the most important British personalities and inventions of the 20th century. Early Britain. The first people to live in Britain were hunter-gatherers, in what we call the Stone Age. For much of the Stone Age, Britain was connected to the continent by a land bridge. People came and went, following the herds of deer and horses which they hunted. Britain only became permanently separated from the continent by the Channel about 10,000 years ago. The first farmers arrived in Britain 6,000 years ago. The ancestors of these first farmers probably came from Southeast Europe. These people built houses, tombs, and monuments on the land. One of these monuments, Stonehenge, still stands in what is now the English county of Wiltshire. Stonehenge was probably a special gathering place for seasonal ceremonies. Other Stone Age sites have also survived. Skara Brae on Orkney, off the north coast of Scotland, is the best preserved prehistoric village in Northern Europe, and has helped archaeologists to understand more about how people lived near the end of the Stone Age. Around 4,000 years ago, people learned to make bronze. We call this period the Bronze Age. People lived in roundhouses and buried their dead in tombs called round barrows. The people of the Bronze Age were accomplished metalworkers who made many beautiful objects in bronze and gold, including tools, ornaments, and weapons. The Bronze Age was followed by the Iron Age, when people learned how to make weapons and tools out of iron. People still lived in roundhouses grouped together into larger settlements, and sometimes defended sites called hill forts. A very impressive hill fort can still be seen today at Maiden Castle, in the English county of Dorset. Most people were farmers, craft workers, or warriors. The language they spoke was part of the Celtic language family. Similar languages were spoken across Europe in the Iron Age, and related languages are still spoken today in some parts of Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. The people of the Iron Age had a sophisticated culture and economy. They made the first coins to be minted in Britain, some inscribed with the names of Iron Age kings. This marks the beginnings of British history. The Romans. Julius Caesar led a Roman invasion of Britain in 55 BC. This was unsuccessful, and for nearly 100 years Britain remained separate from the Roman Empire. In AD 43 the Emperor Claudius led the Roman army in a new invasion. This time, there was resistance from some of the British tribes, but the Romans were successful in occupying almost all of Britain. One of the tribal leaders who fought against the Romans was Boudicca, the queen of the Iceni in what is now eastern England. She is still remembered today, and there is a statue of her on Westminster Bridge in London, near the Houses of Parliament.
We will swallow you up, and our strong green shoots will spring to life where you once stood. See your God tremble and fall before the wrath of Boudicca!
Ridiculous.
Areas of what is now Scotland were never conquered by the Romans, and the Emperor Hadrian built a wall in the north of England to keep out the Picts. Picts were ancestors of the Scottish people. Included in the wall were a number of forts. Parts of Hadrian's wall, including the forts of Housesteads and Vindolanda, can still be seen. It is a popular area for walkers and is a UNESCO, or United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, World Heritage Site. The Romans remained in Britain for 400 years. They built roads and public buildings, created a structure of law, and introduced new plants and animals. It was during the 3rd and 4th centuries AD that the first Christian communities began to appear in Britain. The Anglo-Saxons. The Roman army left Britain in AD 410 to defend other parts of the Roman Empire and never returned. Britain was again invaded by tribes from northern Europe, the Jutes, the Angles, and the Saxons. The languages they spoke are the basis of modern-day English. Battles were fought against these invaders, but, by about AD 600, Anglo-Saxon kingdoms were established in Britain. These kingdoms were mainly in what is now England. The burial place of one of the kings was at Sutton Hoo in modern Suffolk. This king was buried with treasure and armor, all placed in a ship which was then covered by a mound of earth. Parts of the west of Britain, including much of what is now Wales, and Scotland, remained free of Anglo-Saxon rule. The Anglo-Saxons were not Christians when they first came to Britain, but, during this period, missionaries came to Britain to preach about Christianity. Missionaries from Ireland spread the religion in the north. The most famous of these was Saint Patrick, who would become the patron saint of Ireland, and Saint Columba, who founded a monastery on the island of Iona, off the coast of what is now Scotland. Saint Augustine led missionaries from Rome, who spread Christianity in the south. Saint Augustine became the first Archbishop of Canterbury. The Vikings. The Vikings came from Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. They first visited Britain in AD 789 to raid coastal towns and take away goods and slaves. Then, they began to stay and form their own communities in the east of England and Scotland. The Anglo-Saxon kingdoms in England united under King Alfred the Great, who defeated the Vikings. Many of the Viking invaders stayed in Britain, especially in the east and north of England in an area known as the Danelaw. Many place names there, such as Grimsby and Scunthorpe, come from the Viking languages. The Viking settlers mixed with local communities and some converted to Christianity. Anglo-Saxon kings continued to rule what is now England, except for a short period when there were Danish kings. The first of these was Canute, also called Canute. In the north, the threat of attack by Vikings had encouraged the people to unite under one king, Kenneth MacAlpin. The term Scotland began to be used to describe that country. The Norman Conquest. In 1066, an invasion led by William, the Duke of Normandy, in what is now northern France, defeated Harold, the Saxon King of England, at the Battle of Hastings. Harold was killed in the battle. William became King of England and is known as William the Conqueror. The battle is commemorated in a great piece of embroidery, known as the Bayeux Tapestry, which can still be seen in France today. The Norman Conquest was the last successful foreign invasion of England and led to many changes in government and social structures in England. Norman French, the language of the new ruling class, influenced the development of the English language as we know it today. Initially, the Normans also conquered Wales, but the Welsh gradually won territory back. The Scots and the Normans fought on the border between England and Scotland. The Normans took over some land on the border but did not invade Scotland. William sent people all over England to draw up lists of all the towns and villages. The people who lived there, who owned the land and what animals they owned were also listed. This was called the Domesday Book. It still exists today and gives a picture of society in England just after the Norman Conquest. Now check that you have understood all of the following. The history of the UK before the Romans. The impact of the Romans on British society. The different groups that invaded after the Romans. The importance of the Norman invasion in 1066. Rewatch this video if anything is unclear. Good luck!